a remarkably difficult question is whether a person who's divorced can serve as a pastor, or another way to talk about that is an elder or an overseer. I understand pastor, overseer, elder all to refer to the same office. Paul talks about the qualifications for a pastor, elder, overseer in 1 Timothy 3 and Titus chapter 1. And here's what he says. The overarching category is a pastor must be without reproach, which doesn't mean sinless, but that no one can look into this person's life and find any significant reason why they shouldn't serve as a pastor. And another thing that's said in these lists is that they should have a good reputation in the community. Well, how does that relate to divorce? In the history of the church, this has been debated. What does Paul mean when he says a man should be a husband of one wife? I mean, that's one translation in 1 Timothy 3:2. One way of taking this in the history of the church is even after your wife dies, you shouldn't remarry. So if you're to be a husband of one wife, some have interpreted that to mean you can never marry again, even if your wife dies. Now, most people today don't hold that interpretation because Scripture clearly allows remarriage after a spouse dies. So I don't think that view is very convincing, but it is interesting to know. Some people have believed that's what is said. Another interpretation, well, at least a very common interpretation, is that what Paul is saying there is husband of one wife means you can't be divorced. You can't be divorced and remarried. Some people say you can be divorced as long as you don't remarry, because it says a husband of one wife. So people cut the cake in different places there, right? So some people say, well, a divorce, if it's not your fault, is legitimate, but you can't remarry, because once you remarry, you fail of the qualification. And that view could be right. Many people hold that view. You could argue that there's a higher standard for leaders. The leaders need to have an exemplary marriages, and a failing in this area or a remarriage is such that it disqualifies you. Personally, I hold a third view, and that is that we should translate that phrase to mean a one-woman man. A man who has a devoted and good marriage to a woman, which I think means that it's possible that a person could be divorced and remarried and still be considered by the congregation and by the community as a one-woman man. Now, it's not simple, though, is it? I'm not saying that one is qualified to be a pastor if they're divorced and remarried automatically. No, that the church, the other leaders, and as far as you know in the community, have to testify that this person has an exemplary marriage. So, I mean, if we think of particular situations, we can think of a situation where someone was married perhaps at a young age, perhaps their wife was unfaithful, and they got a divorce at a young age. A few years later, this person marries, perhaps goes to seminary, and then maybe 10 or 15 years later, after he's been married to his second wife, after what I take to be a legitimate divorce and remarriage, he has a good reputation in the church and in the community for having a marriage that is pleasing to God, a marriage that other people in the congregation look up to. Now, we always have to consider, is that really the case? Perhaps this person does not have a good reputation in the community, or perhaps there's significant questions about their divorce and remarriage in the church. I think if that's going on, that person should not be appointed as a pastor, because they have to have a good reputation. They have to be without reproach in this matter. I think another situation where it could be permissible. I'm not trying to give every situation, right? We could talk about situations all day long. There's all kinds of circumstances that can come up, but another situation is perhaps a person got divorced and remarried before they were a believer. And they came to Christ a few years later, and then sometime after that, they got married, and then they have a good, significant track record, maybe 10 years. I'm not trying to set any particular number, just giving an example. 10 years of a good, faithful marriage, and the people in the community and the church again recognize the godliness of this marriage, and they recognize this person is truly a one-woman man. I think what we need to remember here is that Paul is giving not exhaustive descriptions, but bullet point characteristics of what does it mean to be a good leader. And here's an illustration I'd use. Paul says that you're not to be a drunkard, that you can't serve as an elder if you're a drunkard. I don't think he means by that you can't have ever been a drunkard. I think he means by that your life is characterized for now a significant period of time by sobriety. The people in your church look at your life and say, this is a person who exercises self-control in the use of alcohol. But it may be in your past you struggled with that. So I think that's an interesting parallel to what we're seeing here. I don't think Paul's saying if you've ever sinned previously in your life regarding marriage, you're disqualified. But now in your life, for a significant period of time, whatever the church judges that to be, you have a track record of godliness and faithfulness, and people respect you in terms of a pastor. So I'm not trying to lower the standard. I think the standard is still high. We see that what it means to be an elder is to be a godly person living out the gospel for a number of years. That what it means to be an elder is that you live in such a way that the members of the church respect you, and you're also respected in your community.
Thanks for watching Honest Answers. Don't forget to subscribe